And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program tonight. Some fascinating developments around our textile industry, and we'll get into it in just a moment. Really strong results from the FYN Group and Mr. Price. And I wonder what that might tell us about what's happening in our clothing and textile industry. Also some questions around what that means in our economy. You wouldn't think that people are able to increase the amount of money they're spending on clothes, really a necessary purchase, but still increasing the amount of money they're spending on clothes when our economy just isn't growing. So something's going on in that industry. Certainly very strong performances by the FYN Group and Mr. Price. I feel I should join the very, very long list and queue of people who have said of Elon Musk and US President Donald Trump that, like Floyd Shivambu and MK, it was always going to happen. And I'm sure people have spent the day saying that. And if they haven't, well, they probably should have. The question, of course, is, do they really get things back together or not? And it's an extraordinary situation that we're in which we kind of all know that Trump makes irrational decisions, changes his mind. There's that new word, taco, Trump always chickens out. And yet, this person is in such a strong position in the White House that you cannot ignore him. And that's what this really says. It also talks about what it says when someone can't really keep strong relationships. And I kind of wonder if once Elon Musk is gone, and I'm sure he will go, who he'll be replaced with. And I can't help but feel that this is how the Trump presidency is going to be, that there'll be someone kind of always hanging around him who seems to have his ear. The one big point I would make, if I may, is that it worries me a lot when you have the US president and the world's strongest man on the same side of an argument. It means that if they are correct, they'll be able to achieve whatever they want. But if they are wrong, they'll be able to achieve whatever they want. It may be better for democracy to have the world's richest man and the American president on opposite sides. And whether that's good for other causes, I don't know. But for a democratic cause, that may just be better for the United States and possibly lead to better economic decision-making, which will absolutely have an impact on us. Good to hear from you tonight. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567 and voice notes this evening on 072 702 1702. Don't forget, by the way, the Friday Biz Blitz in about 40 minutes from now. Looking forward to it.
702. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Well, some interesting numbers from two of our big clothing chains today. The FYN Group reporting a strong increase in full-year earnings. Its headline earnings per share up by 4.6% for the year to the end of March. And in particular, its online store, Bash, doing very, very well. I mean, breaking even 2 years ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, the Mr. Price Group, also a strong year to the end of March, opening nearly 200 new stores during the period. Total revenue up 7.9%. Petri Redelinghuys is a founder at Herenya Capital Advisors. Petri, good evening. Good to have you on The Money Show. Quite strong numbers from both retailers. Mr. Price really does seem to be growing at a very strong pace.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. And yeah, Mr. Price is doing really well, actually. Both of the retailers that put out numbers are actually doing pretty well, even TFG. And I think it's interesting if you compare the two, particularly the TFG, South Africa business with Mr. Price. Both of these businesses are doing really well, and I think that's on the back of, a couple of things, primarily our economy improving. I mean, imagine the power we have if we can keep the lights on, right? The economy can actually grow. And that is what we are seeing. I think consumer sentiment is looking pretty good. We have a stable government of national unity, which, is a very positive surprise and also a very sort of positive indication for consumer sentiment. Interest rates are coming down. We can debate whether or not that's a long-term good thing. I suppose we'll have to wait and see. I mean, generally, it's a precursor to tougher times ahead. But in the shorter term, it's great for property prices. It's great for disposable income. I mean, every 1% that the interest rate comes down, your bond payment comes down 6.5%. That's a big difference, right? So that really increases disposable income. And we're seeing that this is bleeding into the retailers and people are going out and buying stuff, and we're seeing record profits for some of these companies. I mean, it's also encouraging to see someone like TFG actually meaningfully being able to compete against the likes of Temu and the likes of Shine and all these online retailers.
I mean, that in a way was what really stood out for me. But I must point out, Petri, that, our economy only grew by 0.1%. Could there be something going on that we're kind of missing in the economic numbers and the national narrative? The national narrative is not nearly as rosy as you paint it, and yet you can't ignore today's figures.
Look, I think that, I don't know. I'm very bullish South Africa at the moment, right? So my primary thesis here is that we've seen emerging markets, particularly South Africa, really underperform the US for the last decade. And that I think that if we are, from the perspective that I look at least, I think that we're seeing a bit of a power shift from west to east, from NATO to BRICS. And that power shift happens over a very long period of time. But we already see that the BRICS combined GDP is more than that of NATO. We already see that BRICS now controls 90% of the world's oil. So, whether we like it or not, we're lumped in with that group. And I think that we are starting to see an era where we have emerging market outperformance and developed market underperformance, or BRICS outperforming and NATO underperforming. And that shift is starting to happen. So even though we look at the U.S. economy, where if you look historically, every time interest rate cutting cycle is initiated, a recession follows. I mean, go look at history. It happens every time. But here it might be somewhat different. Here we might have a situation where our trading partners are growing, even though the U.S. is perhaps, and Europe is perhaps not doing so well. China, Russia, India, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Brazil, we're doing relatively, better than the rest. And that's going to play to our benefit, and lower interest rates is going to play to our benefit as well. And we can see interest rates are going down, retail sales are going up. So that's a sort of a theme that I think will be in place relatively long.
Petri Redelinghuys, thanks very much indeed, founder at Herenya Capital Advisors. Well, all of these numbers out today, when 2 or 3 years ago, all we were talking about in the clothing sector was what's going to happen with the Chinese online retailers Shein and Temu, and are they literally going to eat the lunch of our retailers? Etienne Vlok is the National Industrial Policy Officer for the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union. Basically, a union that has a lot to fear from Shein and Temu, if I can put it like that. Etienne, good evening. I mean, for so long we've been worried about these two. How do you interpret these results today? Are our retailers, let me put it differently, is our textile industry fighting back?
Good evening, Stephen. Thank you for having me on. I do think we are fighting back. I think through several measures that's been put in place, we've been able to hold back the growth of Shein and Temu. And on the other hand, through additional measures that have been taken inside the economy, inside the industry, we're managing to grow the local industry, managing to ensure that there's a quick supply to those retailers, which have helped their sales and the kind of numbers that you saw today.
I mean, a big selling point for these two Chinese companies has been price. Now, some of that may have changed a little bit. In the past, you didn't really pay customs duties on those goods coming in. You do a bit now. You do in the US too, which is very interesting. Government changed its policy around that. Has that made a difference?
It has, Stephen. If you think about the first time that we started to talk about this in about 2023, we saw a surge of 460% imports in small parcels, and that was largely driven by Shein and then a little later by Temu as well. So this flood of small parcels coming into the country. But it wasn't only a South African problem, it's a problem in many developing countries, Brazil, Thailand, Korea, the Philippines, and in industrialized countries like France, the US, and other European countries. What we managed to do is within the retail clothing, textile, footwear and leather master plan, we forged an agreement on how to deal with this. We went to the government with one voice, and building on this partnership, we then managed to convince SARS to put in place measures to largely close the loopholes that these companies have been using, which meant that they weren't paying import duties, but also importantly, Stephen, they weren't paying any VAT when they brought goods in. So those loopholes were closed on 1 November 2024. And we think it's starting slowly but surely we're seeing the benefits of it, and these retailers are creating a little bit of a breathing space being created for them, and some brakes have been put on these imports.
What we've sort of seen in textiles is a little bit of a race to the bottom in price. Whoever makes the cheapest clothes wins. Now, I can understand that, particularly in our society. But there might be more value for consumers to buy something that is slightly more expensive, but slightly more durable. In other words, you don't buy it from Shein and Temu. Yes, you could. You would wear it 5 times. You wouldn't be able to wear it again. You buy it from Mr. Price and the Foschini Group. Well, maybe your child can wear it 10 times and your second child can wear it 10 times. And therefore, there's more value. But what you're doing then is trying to change the behavior of consumers. Do you think maybe that could be happening too?
Absolutely. One of the things that we can do as South Africa, generally we're slightly more expensive than some of the competitor countries, but we can deliver product quicker to the likes of Bash, owned by TFG, and to Mr. Price. So it means that Bash is able to compete by quickly delivering products to local consumers. And so as a local industry, as a local manufacturing industry, we're able to offer that. And that's also because of this master plan that we set up in the industry, where we've indicated or introduced several new measures. And what one of the major successes of this, Stephen, has been that we've increased by about 59% the number of units bought locally by major retailers. So we went up from about 250 million units in 2019 to about 390 million units in 2024. And so you see that increased number of goods being bought locally, and possibly at a price that's not much cheaper, but at a speed that's much quicker than can often be brought in from other countries.
Etienne, Vlok, really appreciate the time. Thank you. The National Industrial Policy Officer for the South African Clothing, Textile and Allied Workers Union.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Well, you've already heard a reference to our GDP figures this week. The fact our economy grew by just 0.1% in the first quarter of this year. But we keep being told government is investing large amounts of money in infrastructure, and in building that infrastructure should lead to more employment and, once it's completed, lead to more economic growth. However, is money really flowing into that industry? Are we really turning into a building site? Professor Petri Redelinghuys is the president of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering. Petri, good evening. I really appreciate the time. We keep hearing promises that there'll be construction, that more infrastructure will be built. Are we actually beginning to see that happen?
Good evening, Stephen, and your listeners, and thank you for having Saisi in your show. The question to answer is not just a simple yes or no. Let me just say, in principle, yes, we are seeing an increase in infrastructure budget allocation, as well in the longer term, the project identification related to specific public infrastructure. However, one needs to be quite careful when we look at the different industries or sectors, for example, water, roads, energy, and the like. And if we just look at what happened recently in Cape Town, it was the Sustainable Infrastructure Development Symposium, and there the President of South Africa, Mr. Ramaphosa, with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Mr. Dean McPherson, announced for the second time in 2 years the project book that they referred to. And in that, there are it's an announcement of about 231 billion rand of projects over the next 2 to 3 years, spread over 180 projects. Now, then we can also look at the budget speech, where around 420 billion was allocated to transport and logistics. Half of that number, about 219, is allocated to energy, and then another number of 156 billion to water and sanitation. And we must remember that all of these numbers are spread over a period of roughly 3 years. Now, Saisi has a memorandum of collaboration with Public Works, and specific the Center of Excellence Infrastructure South Africa, that reports to the minister, and then therefore also supporting the president. And in that regard, we have developed a construction development index to understand whether there is really growth, really a change. Otherwise, these numbers, you need to compare it with something that happened in the past. So we all know what happened just before the World Cup in 2010. There was a massive increase in construction activities. And what is happening now, then in between we had COVID that also dampened the whole construction industry. So this construction index gives us a number, and we've analyzed data since 2002 to 2022, and we hope to, in a latter part of this year, that we can have the 2023 figures. But if we look at those numbers, in 2014, 2015, that number, we can say it's about 100.
Yeah.
Now, if we go back, 2002, that number was 88. So then we can say, wow, that is some growth into 2014. But then just before the World Cup, that number was 112. Now, where are we now? The number that we have now in 2022 is 81, which is way back still compared to 2002. There is an increase in terms of, since what we can see after COVID, the growth. But again, the growth is not across the country. We've then analyzed different provinces, and yes, as expected, the growth in the Western Cape is higher than other areas, but still there is improvement compared to what we've had, for example, at around about 2018 and so, but we are still not back at the figures that we want to be. However, if we now look at, for example, the comment that Robex made after they announced their annual financial statements on January, where they say they are optimistic, then let's look at what Sunroll is doing as an example, because this is an area where Robex in particular perform, and they are also involved in the rail sector, for example, in earthworks. It's the same type of equipment to use, the same principles to be applied, and in that area they are performing. Now, Sunroll has in the next 3 years a budget allocation of about 87 billion, and if you deduct then the money related to GFIP and other requirements, then there is about an amount of 70 billion available over 3 years. And also in the same process, right? Let's divide quickly the 70 by 3. Then we get to about 33 on a less 23 about the number, where we can see there's going to be growth. But then Sunroll, by their own doing, they are taking over roads from provinces to support the national network. So from that perspective, they are planning another about 3,300 kilometers to be taken over. And in this regard, Sunroll has established in each province now a regional office. So in that sector, it looks great. Mm. But then you also need to look at the other aspects that electricity need to be, or energy need to be looked after. We know about the concerns in the water sector of lots of water and sanitation infrastructure not well maintained. But then also there are ways to or measures that new infrastructure to be provided. So it is positive, but we are not there. We're not back to where we as an industry, civil engineering industry in a bigger sense, to consider. And then we must also remember in the project book, a number of the projects has only been identified, and further feasibility studies need to be conducted to confirm the appropriate scope, etc. But then on the other side, you have some projects that will go into tender and construction very soon. But you hear, the more we separate all of these separate elements of the life cycle of a project or an asset, the less this butter spread becomes on that slice of bread, to put it in simple terms.
Professor, I really appreciate that. A very comprehensive answer to quite a complicated question. I think you're going to have plenty of people Googling your index. Thank you very much indeed. Professor Friedrich Slabbert is the president of the South African Institute of Civil Engineering.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Patrick Matidi is head of equities at Alawani Capital Partners. Patrick, good evening to you. We have several bits of economic data that can be a little bit confusing. We had GDP growth of 0.1%. We've just heard how the infrastructure index from the Institute of Civil Engineering shows that we are not building nearly as much as we should be. And yet we have the Foschini Group and Mr. Price doing so well.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen. Quite a conundrum, but I think it's a bit easier to answer. Yes, if you look at Stats SA's retail sales numbers, they track very closely to GDP, which has been fairly anemic. But then, as I said, the surprise is when these guys report, they tend to print 8-9% growth on the top line, which indicates a fairly buoyant retail sales market in South Africa. I think what's happening here is we're seeing a lot of market share, shifting. So there are guys who are losing hand over fist in terms of market share, and then you've got gainers. And the losers tend to be, your mom and pop type, standalone retail stores that struggle with scale, right? So we're seeing those guys actually struggling to speak to the property guys. That's where a lot of the vacancies are actually still fairly sticky in terms of being able to bring those down. And I think one or two of the unlisted, larger retail guys are still struggling. So we hear that, ad gas is not where it ought to be. So I think what we're seeing is that the guys like Mr. Price, Foschini, because they've got the scale, because they've got the balance sheet, they're able to maneuver and actually steal, their neighbors' market share, and hence you're getting this, the disproportional increase in the earnings numbers versus GDP. And I think also the last year or so, you've also had, the things like, the two-pot system. So what we're hearing is the banks are not seeing a lot of that cash actually paying that debt. South Africans are very, 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 we like spending, and things like apparel and the like, that's where the money goes. And you can see some of that if you look at the results from your clicks, for example, on the beauty side. So I think net, yes, there is a lot of activity in the retail space, but a lot of it, the Cape overall is not growing as in GDP, but you do get guys who are getting more than their fair share.
In the US, obviously a lot going on around Musk and Trump. We don't need to go into all of that, but job numbers coming in today suggesting that, in fact, that economy is still doing quite nicely despite all of the trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that economy remains very resilient, especially on the jobs front, which is where there has been concerns that, some of the policies that have been put on and withdrawn and sort of are still on the table may have had an impact on the jobs market. Despite the numbers coming out today, which had been revised on a lower, they still come in a lot better than expectation. So that's an indication of things still pretty much buoyant on the jobs front, which is good, I guess, going forward, because it kind of staves off fears of a recession for that economy.
Patrick Matidi, thanks so much. Head of multi-asset strategies at Alawani Capital Partners, bringing the time to 6:30.
The Money Show.
The Friday File.
The Friday File.
16 minutes to 7. Well, confirmation now that 3 of Cape Town's finest restaurants have been included in the list of the world's best 100 restaurants. One of them is FYN, and we're lucky enough to have its founder, Peter Tempelhoff, for you now. Peter, good evening. I really do appreciate the time. I'm sure you've got plenty of other things to do. Congratulations on being included in this list. It's a major honor.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for having me on the show. Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a great honor to be on the list again. It's the 5th year in a row, which is a fantastic feat for the team and for the business.
You've been in this game quite a long time, and it must take a huge amount to produce the kind of quality that you do consistently. What are sort of the ingredients of that success? What does it take to make it happen?
Yeah, consistency, innovation, and location to a degree. But I think the first two are the most important, just being consistent in everything you do, in quality, in innovation, in staff management. It's very tough sometimes running businesses in Cape Town. in South Africa in general, because of the graphs, our revenue graphs look like valleys in winter. So it's quite hard to manage that, but we got used to it. And yeah, I think that the bookings do come through with the 50 best announcement. It really has. We have seen an upsurge over the years. And yeah, we're blessed,
The team that you're with must be hugely important. I mean, whether it's the front of house, but particularly for you, the people in the kitchen, obviously.
Yeah, no, the kitchen team's great. We got Ashley, who's been working with me since 14, 15 years now, and we've got Jennifer Huget, who's also been in the industry. She's a stalwart. She does a front of house service. But our team members, some have been with us 10 years. Some have come up from a sculler in the kitchen. Now they're head chef at FYN, as Lucas in particular. So these guys have really been, they've been good to me over the years. And yeah, this is really it's for them, this honor, not just for me.
Cape Town has 3 restaurants in this top list now. Is there a sort of ecosystem effect? If you have 2 or 3 top restaurants, does it make it easier to be a third one, to put it another way? Is there a sort of network effect that just kind of eases it for people coming in?
It's still competitive. It's hard to get on the list. You got to do a fair amount of marketing and networking, and you got to keep at it. You got to play the game to a degree. It's a very competitive industry here in Cape Town, which is good for restaurants. It makes us stronger and sharper and all those good things. But I think there could even be a fourth one, and one in the 1 to 50, which might be outside of the region. I have a feeling of it. So it would be great to have 4 in the 100. And I think what it is just a testament to the region and the country of how strong Cape Town is in particular in its cuisine. And the world is noticing that. It's a dining destination. And I think it's great. It's admirable. And the guys, all the restaurants here are an incredible standard. And it's been so amazing coming back here since 2007 and cooking in this great area with so much competition. It's just made us better.
It's happened in Cape Town. It hasn't happened nearly to the same extent in Joburg, which, I mean, still does have a bigger economy. I'm presuming there are all sorts of reasons for that.
Yeah, I think it's the culture of the wine, and it's got all the wine here, and all this very diversified farmers are here, and there's many things. And obviously, it's a big tourist destination too. So most of our high-end restaurants, most of the clients are foreigners, in season at least. So I think it's not just one thing. It's also a different dining mentality. It's, I don't know, maybe it's more holidays are down here, so they got more time to spend behind the table, whereas in Joburg it's more of an in and out. I can't answer that.
No.
I could.
Well, I mean,
I love Joburg. Yeah.
I'm glad you do. I can think of several reasons around economy. I think you're right about Joburg. Joburg is not really a holiday destination, sort of in and out and all of those things.
Yeah.
I did want to ask a little bit about the ingredients that you use and how many of them come from, let me sort of broaden it a bit, from the Western Cape, and how important that might be, the quality of what's available to you there.
Yeah, the farmers and the qualities of the ingredients we're getting from the farmers are, they are like world-class standard. But I think more importantly is the indigenous ingredients from the Western Cape that we've started using over the last couple of years is probably more important to me, just because of the low watering that they need and the story that they tell about these old ingredients that we've actually lost touch with. And we've actually started using, probably in the last year or two, we've used about 14 new ingredients that I've never used before, thanks to the help of working with a paleontologist who actually brought these ingredients to my attention. Now we're actually growing them on the farm at Beyond Restaurant, and we're using them in the restaurant more and more. And we've got such a great pantry here, not just of great farmers producing great ingredients, but we've got indigenous stuff at our access as well. And I think the world is opening their eyes to this, that we've got this wealth of new ingredients which we can be discovering and putting on a plate and just showing off a bit about, which nobody else can do in any other restaurant around the world. So I think it's very unique for us.
That's so interesting, because if you look at what humans eat, and I'm not talking about fine dining or even FYN dining right now, I'm talking about just generally, we kind of eat pretty much what people ate, 10,000 years ago in some ways, meat, carbohydrates and things. So when you're finding new ingredients, that really is something fresh.
Yeah, absolutely. There is so much in the FYN kingdom that is edible. Some of it's not palatable. You got to work with it a bit. But it surely is edible and it's very nutritious. And, mankind has been feeding themselves and living off this for 100,000 years in the region. So it dates back before agriculture, and and wheats and grains and everything. And it's what they're eating, the roots, the USOs, the underground storage organs at least, and the herbs, the medicinal herbs too. Starch is a bit of a difficult one to find back then, but there's the palmite palm, which is full of starch, and apparently they used to eat that quite regularly because it's very abundant in the region. So it's another topic for another day, I think, but it's very interesting.
With a paleontologist, perhaps. Are there any particular culinary trends that you notice? And what I'm trying to get to is, I mean, for years, and still in my head, because I suppose I'm of that generation and sort of look at things from a kind of Western perspective, people think of fine dining and someone's going to think of the Eiffel Tower. But do you see trends in your industry, and where do those trends start nowadays?
They do, like we were just saying, they start with the ingredient, a unique ingredient, and making it as bare and as kind of pulled back as possible. So we always have, in the kitchen, we design a dish, and then we say, okay, what can we take away from the dish until it's at its purest form? And I think that's where cooking is going. It's very simple. The fine dining restaurants, most of them are tasty menus. So you've got an array of these interesting ingredients, and you can't have elaborate dishes all the way along. So it's very simplistic, maybe a mouthful of something, 2 ingredients combined. So I think less is more nowadays. And I think, yeah, it's exotic places are in right now. South America just has the time in the sun. Well, not necessarily in the sun; they're still booming. But they've had this peak of the wave, and before that it was Spain, and I think South Africa is pretty close to having its time in the sun.
So
it's rightly so.
Well, I mean, so it's possible to start trends here is sort of where I was going, and they would start in Cape Town, obviously. Yeah,
you know what? If you want to take a restaurant like Nando's, if you want to start something here, it's a great place to start it because it's cheapest to get going and take it around the world. But I know that's another topic, but South African restaurants are great. We are trend setting to a degree, but I think we're still young. The industry's in its infancy here. And I think we got still a long ways to go, but I think we're getting there quickly.
And you still see, I mean, obviously getting on lists like this, you're seeing more and more people coming in. You spoke about the dips and troughs that you've had to manage, and I imagine that affects other restaurants that you compete with as well. I mean, to an extent, particularly in Cape Town, it's a sort of cyclical, or seasonal is a better phrase, industry.
Yeah, no, it sure is. I think this year in particular, we had a great summer, and winters come really hard and fast. And I think all restaurants around the city are feeling the pinch. We're ready for it. We know it's coming, but it's difficult when it comes. We all complain about it, but it's just something we have to deal with, and something we have to get to grips with. Is having a good reserve for the winter and lining up on the teams. Unfortunately, getting fixed termers in if we can, and then just doing our best to keep orders down, and to do smarter menus with maybe less expensive ingredients.
Peter, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the time. Thanks so much for the insights into your industry, and stay warm when that cold front hits Cape Town tomorrow. Peter Tempelhoff, the founder of the restaurant FYN. Not very often you get to speak to someone at the top of their game like that.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
Time for the Friday Biz Blitz this evening. You know the number 011 8830702 021 446 0567. If you get the question right, we move on to the next question. If you get it wrong, we move on to the next caller. Really good to hear from you tonight. First question on the Friday Biz Blitz this evening. Which Mexican food has become a phrase used on world markets to explain what Donald Trump has been doing or not doing when he doesn't live up to his word? And you're looking at a Mexican food item, what springs to mind and why? 011 8830702 021 446 0567. Which Mexican food term has become a phrase used on world markets to explain some aspects of Trump's behavior?
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. 011 8830702 021 446 0567. Which Mexican food term has become a phrase used on world markets to explain some aspects of Donald Trump's behavior? George in Tshwane. George, hi. George, are you with us?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go for it.
Lovely, man. It's taco.
It is a taco. What does taco mean for an extra point? Do you know?
Trump always chickens out.
It is indeed, yes. Trump always chickens out. It's the habit of Trump to threaten to impose tariffs and back out at the last minute. Okay, next question. Valterra Platinum, it's a giant mining company. What was its previous name, George? Come on, George, you've been paying attention. I know you have. Valterra Platinum, what was it called?
I'll be lying. All right.
Stephen. George, thank you. I hope you get some Mexican food tonight. Nigel in Rosebank, Valterra Platinum, its previous name. Nigel, hello. Nigel, are you there? We seem to have lost Nigel. Let's try Tumi in Midrand. Tumi, I nearly called you Midrand. Tumi, hi. Valterra Platinum, what was its previous name?
Anglo-American Platinum Mines.
Yes, indeed. Amplats, Anglo-American Platinum. And they changed their name to Valterra Platinum after that demerger. Okay, the next question. Here we go. In retail, the online trading platform Bash, Hobbs London, and Jet Home are all controlled by which retailer, which is on the JSE? Bash, Hobbs London, and Jet Home. Who owns them all? We've been talking about it all show.
I'm going to take a punt. I'm going to say Jet, Clicks, the Clicks Group.
No, to me, I'm afraid not. We haven't been talking about Clicks at all. I mean, apart from that. Any one last guess for you, to me. Come on. JSE retailer, big company.
Big retailer would have been the Edgar's Group. That's the biggest I can imagine. Tried.
I'm sorry, to me, you did. Sorry about that. So, in the retail online platform Bash, Hobbs London, and Jet Home, who owns them? It's a pretty easy question. We've got questions about something the JSE did this week around Iqbal's survey, and we've also got something about Yappy Chef. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. In retail, the online trading platform Bash, Hobbs London, and Jet Home, who controls them? Gwen in Boksburg. Gwen, hi. Who controls these companies?
It's the Foschini Group.
It is, Gwen. Yes, the Foschini Group. Okay, well done. Here we go. The JSE has imposed a public censure and a suspended fine of 500,000 rand on a company controlled by Iqbal Survey. Which company was it? I'm sure you were listening to the Money Show yesterday, Gwen.
Yes, I did. Now that it's escaped me. Oh, goodness.
Oh, Gwen. It's a very short name. Just 3 letters. I really can't give you any clues. The judge is already putting me in trouble, I think.
Oh, okay. We'll need to give it a miss.
No, Gwen. The answer was IO Technologies was the answer. And that's because they did not disclose everything they should have to shareholders. That's the Friday Biz Blitz. You with the Money Show at 7 o'clock.